And I want to bring Suze back for this. Suze, in October, as we've seen, strength seems to be a real thing for Bitcoin. Is that just a fun meme that people repeat every year, or is there any truth that we should actually be looking at these charts and expecting a good October, because history does tend to rhyme?
It does, and it's obviously not a guarantee, but I think there's only been 3 red Octobers since 2009, and it does seem to be that this is where things pick up after the summer doldrums. So, I think October's going to be a thing.
Yeah, and we got some interesting potential catalysts on the way, including a bunch of altcoin ETFs getting approved. So it kind of begs the question, does that type of thing pull attention away from Bitcoin, or does it bring new people who end up buying into Bitcoin too? Because they go into those altcoin ETFs and then they're like, this is no good, and then they're more comfortable, so then they end up allocating to Bitcoin eventually. Are these altcoin spot ETFs a positive step for Bitcoin ultimately?
Well, I'm not going to be a fan of a shitcoin ETF. I mean, I'm not even a massive fan of ETFs generally. I mean, that's not freedom money for me or what Bitcoin is for. However, I believe in freedom of choice. If people want to buy ETFs, then of course that's their choice, and I'm not going to be a dictator about it. They're just not necessarily for me. I don't know. I just think that people will get wrecked, and I think it's really irresponsible if you're going to create an ETF on something that's just built on sand, because there's only a handful of projects that are actually legitimate, in my opinion, out of the millions of cryptos that exist, and most of them trend down when you pair them against Bitcoin. So to give them an ETF almost gives them legitimacy, and I think that could mislead people.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I guess the question I have is, though, do you think that offering these eventually lead more people into Bitcoin from the simple fact that they'll probably get into these ETFs for Dogecoin or whatever junk, get wrecked, but then see, oh, look, Bitcoin has been steadily performing this whole time. So do you think these ETFs could act as maybe an on-ramp to new Bitcoin users down the line as they eventually get burned by these altcoins?
It's possible, but then it's also possible that they put the crypto in the same bucket as Bitcoin, think that it's all shit, and then walk away completely and just go back to tech stocks. I don't know. I'm not really sure. You could argue it both ways, but generally crypto people do end up finding Bitcoin eventually. So yes, I guess so.
I'll admit, I got into Bitcoin initially because a friend told me about XRP back in was it 2016 or something? And I was digging around and I was like, wait a second, this Bitcoin thing sounds way better. And that's eventually how I kind of orange pilled myself. So it happens. I'm not saying it's all the time, but
I was a shitcoiner. That's how I started. No, I absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I was a massive shitcoiner. Please don't take that as the that you take out there.
No, I appreciate hearing that. We all come from that, I think. A lot of us do. And it's nice hearing people that are big Bitcoiners say, hey, I used to believe in this junk, but, I did the work, and now I realize that it is, in fact, garbage, and I'm here for the real thing, which is Bitcoin, which has brought you and I together, which is just so wonderful. And, an interesting narrative that I've seen happen, especially this year, Suze, is that there are people now more than ever seemingly talking about Bitcoin, and then there's everything else in crypto, right? How do you think we can go about pushing that narrative forward so that people understand that Bitcoin, while at first glance seems like it's crypto, is actually a very different thing than everything else that's out there? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, goodness. I mean, if ever I go and I speak somewhere, or I have an opportunity where I'm speaking to somebody directly, one of the first things that I do is explain the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. I mean, it's a very slow way of educating people, but I think it really is the only way. You've just got to keep banging that drum.
And from your seat at the table, Suze, just in the last 2 days, October seems to be taking off better than probably any of us could have actually imagined. Who do you think, or what do you think is kind of doing the heavy lifting right now in terms of pushing Bitcoin's price and the narrative forward right now? Do you think is this history of October, are people really buying into the fact that, hey, October is traditionally one of the best months for Bitcoin, and they're piling in. Is it the ETF headlines or the institutional players still really the ones that are moving things forward in this space? Or maybe is it rate cuts, or maybe a confluence of all of those things? So I guess to rephrase my question, from your seat, what's the biggest driver right now in terms of the positive momentum that we're seeing from Bitcoin?
I think seasonality plays a big part in this, and I think people just come out of the summer and then they start just thinking, right, okay, let's get back on it again. ETFs, I think, are definitely driving it. This whole treasury company boom is a massive factor. And I just think that the supply is getting less, and it's like you say, it's only heading in one direction. I think this price increase is inevitable. I do worry that Bitcoin treasury companies are going to lead to the next crash. I think they're kind of a bit Ponzi style ish, and I'm really concerned that as they hoover it up and the price goes up, when it all goes wrong, it's just going to come crashing back down again.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my next question. When we had you on the first time, I don't think this Bitcoin treasury narrative was quite at the same level that we're seeing right now. So what is it about this play that gives you a little bit of pause? Does it just seem like everybody is jumping in because they saw Saylor do it and expect similar gains, even though, you know, strategy is in such a different place than pretty much every corporate treasury company out there? How do you see this playing out? Do you think then we're going to see this big, I mean, we're kind of seeing now, there's like 190, I think, corporate treasury companies right now. Are we just going to see eventually a bear market of some kind and some of them just not be able to withstand that? And then you'll kind of see this feedback loop of a company bought in at 115, maybe Bitcoin's back down to 90, and all of a sudden their heads are all underwater, and then they have to sell, and then we see a bunch of sells as other companies experience a similar fate? Because that kind of seems like that would be something that could play out. What are your thoughts for that going forward? Because this is uncharted territory.
It really is. I also think that we shouldn't be just viewing all treasury companies as if they're equal. So if you have spare cash on your balance sheet and you want to use that cash to buy Bitcoin, that is a very prudent move. It's the best performing asset of the decade. Of course you should do that. If you're going to dilute your shareholders and have this capital raising cycle where you have to constantly go out, raise capital, dilute your shareholders just so you can keep this flywheel going, then that just feels a little bit Ponzi adjacent, and it feels like something that could ultimately crash. And also, if you're using leverage, that's also not great. So I think it depends on how you're buying the Bitcoin, why you're buying the Bitcoin, how aggressively you are. And another thing that really bothers me is, does it solve a problem? Is your company actually doing anything with Bitcoin? What's the point in taking a failing company like Metaplanet, whacking a whole load of Bitcoin through it, pumping up the price when the underlying business is still shit?